Welcome to Flyline Podcast, where we enjoy the interesting stories behind the legendary guides and fishing luminaries connected to Maine fishing. I'm Michael Jones. Today's special guest is Bill Pierce from New Vineyard, Maine. Bill is a master Maine guide and living legend in the Maine fly fishing community. Bill has an infectious personality and is loved by everyone that has ever met him. Bill has worked in many capacities that have substantially impacted the history and land preservation for the state of Maine for our sport. Bill began his career in Maine working in the ski and golf industry as the sales manager for Sugarloaf USA. Following his success at Sugarloaf, Bill was hired by the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to boost in-state and out-of-state marketing and promotional efforts. In 2002, Bill was recognized as the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Employee of the Year. In 2008, Bill received the distinguished L.L. Bean Outdoor Hero Award for innovation and exemplary service in promoting Maine's outdoors. Following that, Bill became the Director of Development at the Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust, successfully working in fundraising, land acquisition, and acquiring grants for future land conservation projects. Bill was recognized by a new and growing organization that appointed him as the new executive director for the Rangeley Lakes Historical Society, Outdoor Heritage Museum, and Rangeley History Museum. His excellence in community organizing and grant writing transformed the Historical Society and Museum into the most impressive collection of Maine fishing history, sporting artifacts, and historical memorabilia. Bill's hobbies include snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, fly fishing, and upland hunting. Bill's favorite pastime is spending fun times with others in his community, as he is a committed friend to everyone he inspires. Bill and his glamorous wife Rhonda recently celebrated 33 years in their successful marriage. They live in New Vineyard, Maine, with their two German short-haired pointers, Zeke and Boomer. Bill, welcome to Flyline Podcast.
Wow, it's a pleasure to be here. What an honor. I'm a little taken aback at your description, but thank you.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to have you here. I've known you for a very long time, and I think the body of work that you've done for the Maine fishing community, there's a lot to be said about it. And that's part of what we want to try to accomplish this hour is kind of go back, and I like to kind of keep it chronological. I mean, I remember the very first time I ever met you. I was living in Farmington. You were in New Vineyard, and you were working at Sugarloaf, and you wheeled into Aardvark Outfitters in a classic 1960-something or early 70s-something classic car that you were going to give away as a promotional item. Tell me about some of your early marketing at Sugarloaf and what that idea was.
Well, I primarily focused on some innovations that would draw people to the slower periods of time, mostly in January when it can be super cold and it's after Christmas and people's wallets aren't quite as fat. And so we did Border Fest, and that's what that car was about. I went to the Owl's Head auction and waited till the end of the auction when things were less expensive and got I think it was a Comet, a Mercury Comet.
Oh, yeah.
And I was driving it home, and I'm going, geez, I don't want to give this thing away. I want to keep it. I mean, it was just a little cherry. And we would load it up. We'd get different vendors to give us all kinds of product and swag, and we loaded it up. And that weekend it ended up being, sold out. And the condos, we sold tickets, and there was a lot of live music and a lot of fun. Dana Bullen was a great inspiration at Sugarloaf. He went on to Sunday River, and he's a good friend I hunt and fish with to this day. And he and I had a lot of fun doing different promotional things. So that was a great job. I've had so many good jobs where people say, "Hey, how'd you get that job?" And then
I'm interested to know. I think there's a story behind your interview for Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife with marketing. Isn't there a story there?
Mark Laddie, a dear friend who actually works in the commissioner's office today, called me up and said, "There's a perfect job for you at IF&W. They're creating a new position where you do public relations." Take people hunting and fishing to create media stories. And basically, it's a super creative position that they have never had before. to improve the image of the department and share the wonderful resources in our state. I had nothing to lose. I had a great job. I mean, if you got a job where your skis are in the corner of your office and you're looking at a high-speed quad, that's a pretty good job. And so I had nothing to lose when I went on the interview. And I went in, I think I was last up out of 5 people they were interviewing, and I looked on the wall, and Lee Perry was the commissioner, and all the pictures of past commissioners are on the wall in this waiting area. I'm waiting in outside the conference room, and I got an hour or so before my interview, and I look up, and Lee Perry's been there for a year, and his name tag isn't on his picture. Right across the street was a trophy maker. So I run across the street, and I'd used the guy before to make trophies of Sugarloaf, and I said, "Hey, give me a name tag and have it look like this." Same font and everything. And at the end of my interview, it was going really well, and I basically, they said, "You have anything else to add?" I says, "Yeah." I says, "I think you need this on the commissioner's picture outside, so I just want to make it a gift to the department." I got a call on the way home. It said, "Would you like the position?"
Of course you did. Yeah, and you hit the ball. You hit the ball out of the park. For the audience, if you've ever walked into LL Bean or the Kittery Trading Post and you see those baseball hats and coffee cups and T-shirts that have the Maine Department logo on them, that was Bill's brainchild. That was his baby, and that was only one of the things that you did to help. Basically what the department was trying to do was there just wasn't enough revenues by selling licenses and snowmobile registrations to cover the needs of the department. And so they were looking for new and innovative ways to make money. Bill, but am I getting this correct?
Yeah, but I think it was more brand awareness. I'll explain. The first prototype, it was not popular within the rank and file. Hey, I had to work hard to wear that logo. Any schmuck can wear it. And I understood that. I said, but, if somebody buys this hat and is willing to wear it, they're supporting you. They're behind you. They're on board with your mission. So why wouldn't you do that? And the other thing is the officiality of it. I can remember when I was a kid seeing basically, things like property of the University of Michigan athletic department, and students would take it. People wanted that officiality. They wanted to support something they love. They have the term Maine across that beautiful logo shield. I said, people will want this and we'll make some revenue, but they'll also carry the flag for us. And that was important. I'll give you an example. It got so popular. I was at LL Bean for a meeting with Mike Gautry, who was instrumental in making it happen. And there was a manager of the Tokyo LL Bean there. And he said, we started selling it in Tokyo, the Maine IF&W logo merchandise. And they had sold 5,000 pieces. Okay? So for us, it was $1 a piece. But that'll tell you, that was being worn in discos, not duck blinds.
Right.
So it was really pretty interesting. But the first prototype I had given to my brother. And I said, "How do you like the hat?" He says, "I call it my pool cleaning hat."
Yeah,
Johnny,
okay.
Johnny, why is that? He goes, "Well," he says, "I'll wade into a pool and there'll be other anglers around, and all of a sudden there'll be this huge, people will be reeling up and getting out of there because maybe they weren't barbless or maybe they had a worm on the end of their fly." He says, "You get this sudden air of compliance, Bill. It's amazing." So I'm calling it my pool cleaning hat. So and therein lies, that's really what you want. In terms of the warden service, it's not about the number of tickets you write. It's the resource you protect more effectively. And that was probably the biggest benefit of doing that program.
Well, Bill, that was only one part of it, was selling merchandise, but I know you went on the road, and I know you love going to shows. I love going to shows as well. And I'm sure you have a few fun stories to tell about some of the work that you did on show. What were the shows that were the big ones for Maine IF&W and you?
Well, I really felt it was important. There was a lot of hook and bullet shows, and when I came on board, When I say that hook and bullet, it's, you could have elk hunting or bear hunting or, rubber worms, anything. And Harrisburg comes to mind as being this huge, acres of sporting interests. And it was, it's direct sales. You establish credibility with a customer and try to convince them to come your way. So that's what we were doing and showing the flag. And we actually sold merchandise there to support the effort. So it didn't cost anything to go and attend these shows because we had a little budget. Well, anyways, the most interesting shows and the best shows for us ended up being the fly fishing shows. Marlborough, Somerset, Wilmington. Because the customer was really into it. They are willing to travel, in most cases very well heeled, and the other thing is the beauty of it is the fulfillment on the product was very, very easy. We would give lists of guides and regions they could go to, and if you got a game warden standing in the booth and he's just holding a DeLorme Atlas and he opens it up in front of a customer, instantly he'll have 10 people around him. So that was pretty powerful in terms of promoting folks for direct sales. But by far the fly fishing shows.
Yeah, but I also think that you started to rub elbows with a lot of kind of luminaries in the general fishing community, and that helped to help promote the state. Let's talk about some of the people that you brought. Lefty Cray. Let's just talk about Lefty. You brought Lefty to Maine. I'm sure Lefty had been to Maine, but you gave him a season pass to Maine.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty easy to do. One of the finest human beings I've ever met. The opportunity just to sit down to dinner with him, let alone fish, was just such an honor. One of the most engaging, kind, just an absolutely beautiful human being who sincerely cared about everyone he was around. He could be in the booth and some captain of industry, some rich guy would be standing there and just fawning over Lefty Cray, and a little kid would walk up and Lefty's attention would go right to that little kid, and he'd make him feel like he was the center of the universe, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah, I'll never forget the day we were all out fishing together, and he had Natalie, your daughter, fishing with him because that's who he wanted to spend the day with. Yeah.
I'll never forget going. It was kind of a late start in the day, and I had my drift boat, and Natalie went to first period at school, and she was, I think, in 5th grade, and Lefty kept on saying, "You got to go. I want to fish with Natalie. I want to fish with Natalie." And that meant the world to me. But I went to pick her up, and her teacher was there, and Rick Hardy. And I go in, and he goes, "Where are you going?" I says, "Well, we're actually going to play hooky. We're going fly fishing with Lefty Cray." And out loud he goes, "Get the F out." Right in front of the class. And I said, right. Yeah. He says, Can I come? He was ready to leave his job right on the spot to go fish with Lefty.
That's a great story, and anybody would as well. I remember picking him up one day. I think we were getting ready to go fish up around Bethel with Rocky Frieda, and then the next day we were going to drop down into Dixfield and Rumford area. And but anyhow, to go back to when I picked him up at the Jetport, I was sitting in the satellite parking lot across from baggage claim, and I've got fly rods on the top of my Jeep, and this guy walks up and he's, "I caught so many stripers this summer, and let me tell you what I do to catch fish." And I'm just sitting back listening to him talk, and Lefty comes walking out of the terminal. "Good morning, Mike. Thanks for coming to pick me up." And I'm like, "Hey, Lefty, all right, let's put your bags in the back here." And this guy's jaw was on the parking lot ground. It was hilarious. So, but the great part about him was, 5 minutes up the road in the car, you forget that you have this rock star, because he was just such a genuine. You felt like you had your uncle or your neighbor in the car with you. He was just such a down to earth person.
devoid of pretension. But you're hanging out with the Babe Ruth of fly fishing. Truly.
Yeah.
I mean, the most accomplished fly fisherman probably that's ever lived. I mean, you go into the basement of his house in Maryland, and I mean, very unassuming home too.
Oh yeah.
And this is a guy who, Tom Brokaw and Liam Nielsen will pick up in a private jet just to go and fish with him. And, you go into his house and, it's got some real treasures on the wall upstairs. But when you go in the basement, oh, my Lord, he was so technical. I mean, he had a machine that would test knot strength and leaders and, all these different prototype rods, many of which he developed. I actually told him one time I was going fly fishing with Rhonda. He absolutely loved Rhonda. All my kids, too. And I said we were going fly fishing in Abaco. He says, I'm going to send you a rod. He sent me a Temple Fork he was working with, of course, at the time. And he says it's a one-of-a-kind. And he had personally engraved his signature in the reel seat, and it has information about the prototype that it is. He says, and it's the only one of its kind in the world because I really like the blank, but I hate the fighting butt on it, so we're going to change that before we sell it. And that's down in the basement, and the kids are already arguing who gets it when I croak. So we fish with it still.
Yeah, I remember I was in the boat with him, and he loved to talk about knots, and he sometimes just put the rod down, we put the anchor down, and he would just show me knots for 45 minutes, and he'd say, some people say, Michael, you can't, this is the knot, this is the strongest knot. And he says, Michael, I have an $800 knot testing machine, and it does not have an opinion.
Well, great. He was so charming, and brilliant man. And I'll never forget the time we had stopped for lunch, and lunch was over, and we had all the drift boats there, and you were doing what you do. You've been guiding, and you started stretching out a line, and Lefty put down his coffee, and you two kind of went off to the side. And he was watching you cast, and you guys started a technical conversation that I will never forget. I mean, you, Mr. Man, were stretching it out to the point where, here's Lefty Craig going, wow. Now, Lefty could be flowery, nice cast, Bill, or something like that when you're actually fishing. But you were you were sending it into another area code, and he told you to do something a little bit different, and you changed it up, and it went even further. And, I know this sounds complimentary to you, and I hate that because I don't want it to go to your head. But it was fun to watch you guys hanging out together and basically doing a click and clack tech talk right there. It was pretty fun.
Well, I think you're saying something that's really important for everyone to realize, and that is when you're standing inside your own body, you can't see your own golf swing. And what Lefty could do is he could stand outside of anybody and diagnose what he was seeing in a meaningful way. And it wasn't just criticism. It was more like, hey, I want to make you better. And he did that for everybody, myself included.
Oh, he took me onto a piece of a piece of lawn once. And he says, Bill, I like the way you are. And he says, you could sell TV sets at the school for the blind. He says, but that makes you a good teacher. And he says, I want to teach you how to teach. And that was just so profound to me. And to this day, he taught me 4 things that I do when I'm fishing all by myself, where I make a mistake in my cast, and I instantly know what I just did and how to correct it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just so valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we could talk a lot about him. He gave us so many wonderful memories just in his visits to Maine, and I have to say thank you, Bill, because you introduced Lefty and also King Montgomery, who will probably ultimately get on the podcast because he's another one of my favorite humans.
Oh,
he's a great guy. Yeah, I mean he's just he's turned into a friend, and he's come to South America with me, and we fished even last year. And for the listening audience, King Montgomery is a prolific contributing writer for a lot of the magazines in sporting fishing and hunting in the area. Bill, let's segue into Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust, because I think that was your next professional chapter after IFNW. What kind of got you to go there?
Nancy Perlson was the executive director, and Shelby Russo, I think, who's now on the advisory council, and she's still employed there. They wanted to hire a director of development, and I didn't even know what that was. Why would a land trust need a director of development? I mean, and of course it's about fundraising. And my first answer was, well, why would I want to do that? I don't want to ask people for money. And I was a direct sales kind of guy and grassroots, guerrilla marketing guy. And they said, well, you're the only person we're looking to hire. And I ended up doing 3 different sit downs with Nancy, and the first 2 I had said, no, I don't want to do it.
Wow.
It's funny, Michael, because the thing I ended up enjoying the most was asking people for money. Because what we were doing, it was, the beauty of the job was whatever I was successful at, or what we were collectively successful at, was going to last well beyond our lifetimes in terms of future generations were going to enjoy what we could conserve. And that's pretty cool. And I basically would instead of pound on people, I'd think of an individual and what makes them tick a little bit, and say, why wouldn't this work for you, and present it that way. And it was successful, and we raised some money and had some fun and saved some pretty special spots for the future. And I have to say, Nancy Perlson was just an amazing woman in terms of her support of whatever I was doing as a boss, but her passion for conserving land in the Rangeley Lakes region. And she did so in such an unassuming way that it's something that she was behind most of everything that's really been saved up there that's really, truly special. So it was a pleasure to work there for 5 years.
Yeah, Nancy Perlson has definitely done, her name is decorated in the Franklin County region for the work that she's done, and Rangeley is a better town today because of her, and Aquasic as
the
well.
whole region is. The whole region is.
Yeah. Bill, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to talk a little bit more about some of your work that you did with the museum.
Sounds great.
For this Flyline flashback, I want to share a passage from the book Maine Game Wardens, written by Eric White. Following Maine's admittance into the Union in 1820, a few laws were passed dealing primarily with the method of taking fish along the tidal river mouths and bays. As the state's population grew, the laws involving fish were expanded to include freshwater species, and, along with some unpaid men called fish wardens, were Maine's first attempt at conservation. Fish were still abundant everywhere, and most people saw no cause for alarm, therefore, compliance was very limited. The Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife was established in 1850. As for hunting, there had been game laws regulating the seasons since 1830, but since there were no bag limits, no enforcement was attempted. The first attempt at enforcing any game laws came in mid-1860s when the legislature authorized 7 counties to appoint moose wardens. These men were met with very limited success and received anywhere from $25 to $85 per year, depending on the apprehensions they made. So, Bill, let's talk a little bit more about your work with Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust in terms of land acquisition. I know there was a really unique story there with a parcel of land that you wanted to turn into an asset for the area. Can you tell me more about that?
They had, prior to my arrival there, they had developed this great program called EcoVenture. And EcoVenture is a summer camp, day camp for kids in the region up there. And, and it really provided an awesome experience for a lot of the children of Rangeley that may have come from an economic circumstance that wouldn't be able to afford them the opportunity. And EcoVenture was just fabulous. And, a lot of folks up there, because the summer's so busy, mom and dad are working. What are the kids doing all day? So they had a campus that was donated to them, and but it wasn't on water. And you know what it's like in Rangeley. It's the most expensive waterfront property in Maine. And so to acquire a campus that was on water was difficult. Well, Jean Noyes was she owned a set of camps right next to Rangeley Lake State Park. And Jean had been a strong opponent to everything the Heritage Trust was doing. She was in the real estate business. Sheldon Noyes, her partner and husband, was a big developer of land in the Rangeley region, very successful, also a powerful member of the Maine Senate, a real horse and a cool guy. Well, I had developed a relationship outside of my land conservation and her development interests with her, where she was just a nice lady to go and talk to. So we'd hang out, we wouldn't talk about business, and we had formed a friendship. And I was sitting on her porch overlooking Rangeley Lake one day, and I said, I've got to talk to you. And she goes, oh, here it comes. You're going to ask me to support that damn land trust and give some land or money, and I'm just going to tell you, Bill, I like you, but I don't give a hoot about what they're doing, taking money out of the tax rolls and stuff. I said, just hear me out. I says, you want to sell this property, this historic set of camps. Nabobin was the name of the camps, and her house was on it. And I says, you want to sell this, but you have 2 covenants where you can't sell it. She goes, how'd you know that? I says, I did my homework a little bit. And I said, well, whoever buys this place has to run it as a camp for 5 years. And the other thing is, you have to give first refusal to the state on any offer, which will hold it up for another 6 months. She goes, yeah, and she starts rocking even faster. She's really agitated. And I said, what if I can get those things lifted so you can sell this property? She goes, I'm listening. I says, I need a piece of land between you and the state park. And we just need a lot, and we need 350 feet of river frontage for the kids, lake frontage for the kids, and all the way out to the road for a campus. And she says, why would I do that? I says, because you've got to sell this place, and if I can make that happen with the state for them to release your covenants, how about it? So I went to Beardsley. She said, yeah. I went to Commissioner Beardsley with the Department of Conservation at the time and presented to him. He says, what are you doing negotiating our covenants? This is not your covenants. You work for the state of Maine. I'm representing the children of Rangeley and the people of the state of Maine, Commissioner. I says, with all due respect, you work for us. And so tell me why you wouldn't do this. He says, well, we need something more. Well, there was a big map of Nabobin in the state park right in front, and then right there on the spot, I put a pencil mark right on the shoreline, and I said, we own the land at South Bog Stream, all conserved, right next to the state park over on the other end. What if we give you a piece of property that looks like this? And I drew a big triangle right out of South Bog Stream land that we owned as the land trust. And we give that to the state of Maine. And you'll be able to hunt and fish on it. Can you imagine a piece of state park that allows hunting on it? And his eyes lit right up. Of course, he worked for Governor LePage, and Governor LePage knows where Buck is. And he said, yeah, we'll do that. Well, I hadn't cleared it with anybody. But I said, well, I'll bring it back to our board of directors and see what happens. So basically, we gave up the sleeves of our jacket. It was conserved land anyways. Who cares who owns it if it's conserved? And the kids got a future campus on the other end of the state park, and Jean got what she wanted. And it all worked out. So it was fun to be able to do stuff like that.
Well, the land trust has done such a great job. I mean, Rangeley just doesn't look the same anymore. It's protected.
Oh.
So many. I mean, we spent a week in Rangeley this summer on vacation, Sherry and I, with my family, and it's just wonderful. We were actually right down by the state park, and I know all these locations that you're talking about. And thank you, Bill, for protecting that forever, because we went canoeing one night, and there's miles of shoreline there that are undeveloped, and it should stay that way.
Well, I played a small part in all that. So many other people before me and after and since my short tenure there. I mean, what David Miller, the director, has done there, and Paul Reynolds, the president of the board, and the whole board, it's a fabulous land trust. They do fabulous work. And what they've done since then has just been monumental. I mean, the work up in the Kennebago area, with the help of a dear friend of that we share, and
yes,
along the Rapid River as well. I mean, I know he wants to remain anonymous, but the trust puts people like that together with projects that make a difference for future generations. So it's pretty special.
Yeah, I actually went in to Kennebago with him this springtime, and was able to just go through the parcels that were acquired, and that's a big piece of land, buddy. That's a big piece of land in there,
and it's an important piece of land because it's at the headwaters of the Androscoggin River. So, yeah.
Yeah, and with global warming, I think that's a place that may serve as a real strong buffer to slow that process down for Maine. Bill, let's thank you again for all the work you did with the land trust. I think that's part of one of the largest footprints that you've made in your career. But the larger footprint for me, really, I think, is the museum. You really came into your best work when you started working with the museum. I don't remember the story behind how you went to the museum. Can you tell? I know Don was involved in getting you involved, but
Don Palmer was the reason I was back in Rangeley, and he said, we can't pay you a lot of money. We got enough to pay you for 2 years. This is the job. He had a health event, so he was concerned who was going to pick up the torch on the project and run with it and expand it. And he said, I really want, and he was a dear friend. I mean, he and Stephanie, I owe a great deal to, and the region owns so much too. He just, he's gone now, but he brought me on board, and I said, I love history, but I don't know much about museums. He says, Bill, we need you to raise money and gain support for the project. That's what we need you to do, and you'll learn all the rest of that. Michael, I don't think I read anything but Rangeley history for 9 years. I think I read one other book, and now I still even write columns about the history. It was such an easy job as a museum director and a historical society director, because the history just is monumental and so rich. The other thing is, a lot of Gilded Age history, and a lot of wealthy people came there and they bought the best stuff and numerous examples thereof. So it's survived. A lot of that great fishing tackle and memorabilia and what have you. And just basically what I did was, build exhibits that told great stories about an amazing time, and with so many luminaries in the fly fishing world.
Yeah, and Bill, I think if you guys had not done it, Don Palmer and yourself had not done it when you did, even if it started now, it wouldn't have the same impact that it has today, because how many generations does it take to lose that old Herbie Welch fly or fly vest? And it just, things get thrown away, things get discarded, and you guys just, I mean, just in your own time there, the collection just exploded. I mean, the collection at the museum is just commanding. You don't have enough hours in the day to take it all in.
Well, Don, he said, it was a build it and they will come. And when I took it over, he didn't have enough within his own collections and what he was getting for loans to really fill the space. So there was a lot of foam core and copies of pictures and stuff. Now there's not enough space to put everything in, and we had 100, an average year, we'd acquire 100 artifacts.
Yes.
And it was, I had a guy walk in, and he had a old map of Maine, 1822, a Moses Greenleaf map, 1822. I ended up finding out there was only 3 in existence. There still is only 3 known. And it's 1822 map of Maine. And, it's in rough condition. And I said, where did you get this? He goes, well, he says, I was working as a laborer on a construction job in Manchester by the Sea in Massachusetts. And the owner got impatient because we weren't clearing the stuff out because he wanted to modernize this old mansion. And it was in the dumpster.
Ooh. Ooh.
And he said, I pulled fly rods and this map out of that dumpster, a couple old coffee tables, because the guy that owned the place was upset with the contractor that he hadn't removed the contents yet, and he was just walking out of the house and throwing stuff in this construction dumpster. And one of them was this map. And
yeah, that goes to exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it doesn't take long for things that are of great importance to our sporting history to just get discarded because people don't understand the value of them. And I mean, I love the hardest thing for me when I was visiting the museum with you, Bill, was trying to leave. I couldn't, because you had, just Mike, one more thing. Let me just show you that. And Herbie Welch, he went and he got in this fly casting competition, and this is the jacket he wore.
Yeah.
I mean, take me through the rooms a little bit. Starting when you walk in the door and you turn right, there's a reconstructed cabin, right?
Right. Well, Don and Stephanie, I mean, they're just a great team to get this thing going. And they had found out about this old cabin on a property off the Loon Lake Road, and it was just a local guide's cabin. He guided hunters out of it to pick up some extra money, and Lehman Wilcox was his name, and he built this beautiful cabin, and they had it disassembled and reassembled when they were building the museum as the initial place you walk into, and it's just so cool. And and since that time, while I was there, I had been working with a family, a blue collar family up in Parmacini. Their father had been at the auction for Parmacini Club and had acquired a Maine caribou mount that John Danforth had on his lodge wall, and Maine caribou, and I just had to have it for the museum. And working with the Emerson family over a year and a half of convincing them that this is where it needed to be, and that their father would love the fact that it was there, and we would recognize that. And they couldn't afford to just donate it, so we worked out a little cash and a Quebec caribou head for it, and basically it epitomizes any success I had was just building a relationship with folks to a point and treating them the way I'd want to be treated if I had that treasure, and caring about them and the treasure so it would get conserved. And the place is packed with gems.
Yeah.
Just by operating that way.
And, I think that's one of the things that gets lost in translation is, what is a museum? A museum is really just a large collection of people donating things from their private collection so that the general public can enjoy it. It's not just
Yeah.
the work that Bill Pierce did, but it's the work of the people that actually donated it ultimately to the collection or
Right.
sold it. That's a decision. You to decide you're going to part
Absolutely.
with something because of its importance. To the history of the area. And if anybody who's listening to this has not been to the museum, you definitely need
Oh,
to take time out of your day. It's a diamond in the rough, and it's wonderful. And
yeah.
you did a ton to make that place what it is today, Bill, and we all thank you
Thanks.
for your work there. It's just really great.
It's,
Um,
I'll tell you
yeah,
an
Bill.
aside to that really quickly.
Yeah.
This gentleman showed up and he says, I'm writing a book about fly fishing equipment and vintage equipment. And they said, I really had to come here and talk with you and see it. And it's a big coffee table book called Fly Fishing Treasures by Stephen Voigt. And give you an example of the quality of the museum. There's two other institutions featured in the book outside of private collectors, and one is the London Fly Fishing Museum, and the other one is the Fly Fishing Museum in Vermont. So I mean, we're a pretty fast company. The London Fly Fishing Museum and the American Museum of Fly Fishing. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and now Maine has its own peg to hang the hat on. I mean, it's wonderful that
Yeah.
it exists. And yeah, do you guys have any classic cane rods there? I know you probably have some Herbie Welch rods and
We have all kinds. I mean, the other thing is, we took loans, and that was really important, loan of artifacts, because, Michael, you walk in and you look at something and you look at the tag underneath it, donated by Michael Jones or loaned by Michael Jones. You don't care. You just want to see the baby, And,
right. Yep.
and so we got loans from the Maine State Museum, and so a wonderful rod collection, just on loan for a couple 3 years of various cane rods, and of course the largest collection of Carrie Stevens original flies in the world, thanks to Don and Stephanie's passion for collecting that. He actually one day got 20 Carrie Stevens flies at a yard sale in Rangeley in a cigar box, and two of them were still in the package.
Oh,
And
Lord.
and he said, I
Lord.
felt like Beelzebub for only spending $40 on it.
Oh,
I mean, there's flies that are worth $1,000 tied by Carrie Stevens. An Atlantic
Yes.
salmon original gray ghost in unused condition. That's $1,000. And another time I was at the front desk and I hear somebody go, shit, out loud in the museum. I figured they bumped into something and broke it or whatever. And I go running back there, and the guy's standing in front of the Carrie Stevens exhibit. He goes, these are valuable? I said, hell yeah. I said, come on out front. I says, we sell duplicates of in our collection that, to support the museum. We have some Carrie Stevens originals out front. And he looked at the prices and he spun around in place, cussing. He looked like the Tasmanian devil. I thought he was going to break something in the gift shop. And I go, what? He goes, I've been casting these things for 15 years from my grandfather's fly wallet. I said, you're kidding me. He said, oh, I've hung them in trees. I've lost them on fish, hooked them in the bottom of pools. I said, you got to be kidding me. He says, no. I says, you got any left? He says, oh, maybe a half a dozen. I said, do me a favor. Send me pictures of them, because if they're patterns we don't have, I'm going to make you an offer. So it was like Antiques Roadshow running that
I know.
place. It was just
I know.
so much fun.
Anything from Fly Rod Crosby? Are there any artifacts from Fly Rod Crosby?
Oh, we had some. There's cool stuff there today, but we actually got on loan from the state of Maine, and it's in their collection. It's probably in their warehouse again. But we had it on exhibit for a while because she did sports shows herself. The greatest promoter in the history of the state of Maine for hunting and fishing was, without question, Fly Rod Crosby. A direct sales monster. Okay, there'd be 350,000 people that would go through the New York Sporting Exhibition in 1898 in Madison Square Garden. And Fly Rod was a star. So she had become friends with another promotional star, and that was Annie Oakley, the little sure shot. And she became friends with Annie, and Annie gave her a Native American Plains Indian purse that had been given to her by one of the performers in the Buffalo Bill Wild West show. And she gave it to Fly Rod, which was really cool. It's in the State of Maine collection. And we had it on exhibit for 2 years. We also, the box that sat a little wooden box that sat on the desk at Upper Dam House that all Carrie Stevens flies were sold out of is in the collection. We have several gems. We have a paddle that was given to Fly Rod and just all kinds of stuff. But she was a really cool lady. I had the pleasure of writing her application for the Maine Women's Hall of Fame. And because I was walking through there one day at the University of Maine Augusta, I didn't even know it was there. I go, what the heck? No Fly Rod Crosby in the hall? So I wrote the application, and she was admitted the following year.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't remember if it was Fly Rod Crosby, but I was recently looking at something history related to Maine fly fishing, and your name came up as quoting that this person was the Tom Brady of... Do you remember who you added that? You attached Tom Brady to someone in Maine fly fishing history. I'm trying to remember who that was.
I'm trying to remember too, but I'm always making comparisons. It's hard to... But, Fly Rod... being an overachiever. I mean, Tom was like drafted in the 6th round. And, right. Fly Rod, like so many Mainers, they came from humble roots and started flying in high circles. And she had consumption, tuberculosis, when she was a child. Her father died of it. Her brother died of it later on. She overcame a lot. I think a big reason she became such a great writer is because she blew her knee out getting off the train in Phillips, and it dragged her down the track. It didn't come to a complete stop, the narrow gauge train, and her long skirt got caught, and she couldn't go tramping through the woods as much anymore, so she just started writing about it, and prolifically. They changed the name of a newspaper because of her. I mean, the Phillips Phonograph, and Phillips was quite a regional little empire in the wood business, and they had a newspaper called the Phillips Phonograph, and because so many people wanted news from the region that they wanted to come and hang out in, they changed it to the Maine Woods, and she was the lead writer, and all the people, the famous and wealthy sports that came to the region wanted to hear about the place they loved, so they got subscriptions to the Phillips Phonograph, and it became the Maine Woods.
Yeah, and I think Fly Rod Crosby will go down as one of the greatest women legends in Maine sporting for sure, but there's another important woman that's in your life, Rhonda, and I've known Rhonda as long as I've known you, and I just think you're a great couple. Tell me how you met Rhonda.
She was my best friend's little brother's girlfriend. And I needed a babysitter one time. I was down in Florida, and my best friend, Tommy, says, I know, why don't my brother's high school girlfriend, Rhonda, she could do it. And I said, sure. So she was actually the babysitter for first. It's not how you sound. I mean, we didn't become a couple till 6 years later, but Tommy had died in a car accident, and his brother that Rhonda was engaged to was hit by a drunk driver and killed while he was with Rhonda. So she was like family to me because we had gone through so much together. And I was out on a date one time, and I was with a girl that Rhonda had probably given me crap for being with, because she was like a sister. And I said, geez, why not Rhonda? Why am I not going out with Rhonda? And I presented it to her, and she told me she wouldn't go out with me because I was a slut. She loved me, but, like family, but no. And I asked her, we ran into each other again two weeks after that, and she said, thanks for screwing me up. I says, why? She says, well, I've thought about it a lot, and I think we ought to. And it was like we got married on the spot when we went on our first date. We went to the parents' house of my best friend and her fiance, and they both cried, and he asked me if I needed money for the date, and then told me he was going to kill me if I'd done anything to hurt her. And I've honored that for 36 years, and it's been my pleasure.
36 years. Okay,
your friend. She raised my first two. I had two children at the time, and
that's
she
right.
took on me and a 4 and a 5-year-old, and put up with my fly fishing addiction. So think about it.
Yep.
I mean,
yep.
I won the lottery, buddy. I won the lottery.
Yeah, you did, and you have a beautiful family, Bill. I love.
Yeah, we had two more
guys at your house, and
I had to have a vasectomy reversal for that, and I don't recommend that, Michael. You never want to have a vasectomy reversal. It's like they take your boys out, and Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe play a 5-setter with them, and then they tuck them back in. Oh my God.
Oh, Bill, you're so full of it, and that's why I love you so much.
I love you too, buddy.
This podcast is about the people, and you are you're the perfect candidate for it. And I really appreciate you getting on with me and spending an hour chatting and sharing some of your life with the audience. And Bill, it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
The pleasure's all mine. We could do it again, cover some completely different interview material, and you'd think you were talking to somebody with a completely different set of stories. So,
I know that. Maybe we will have you come back again, Bill. Thanks for your generosity and everything you've done for the sporting community in Maine.
Never threaten me with a good time, baby. Good seeing you. Have a good one. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you so much, Bill. Have a good day. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for joining us for this intimate discussion, and thank you for listening to Flyline Podcast. A new Flyline Podcast episode will be released every 2 weeks on Tuesdays, so be sure to come back to meet our next famous guest. Until then, this is Michael Jones. Flyline Podcast is a product of Riverside FM.